Now, in tonight's show, I'm going to be visiting with Vice President Mike Pence, but the interview was taped before the president's trip to Europe, where it ended with the widely panned press conference with Russian President Putin. So we obviously didn't cover those events, but I will. Though condemned for his tough talk to NATO, President Trump has actually gotten some results by openly and publicly criticizing European nations who gained the most by NATO being protected, but basically being deadbeats and freeloaders who didn't pay even what they promised and instead let those of us in the U.S. pick up the tab. Well, that is until President Trump. The U.S. might as well have stood for us suckers. Was he gentle and diplomatic in shaming our allies to stop their free feeding at the trough? Not even a little bit. But the results are encouraging. While most of the slacker nations are now agreeing to put their money where their miserly, mealy mouths have been. Oh, and in the UK, the president was as straightforward in public as in private with Prime Minister Theresa May. She has the responsibility to get the UK out of the European Union due to the Brexit election. But she seems about as happy to do it as Hillary was to sit on the stage watching Donald Trump sworn in as president. The net result is that the U.S. and the U.K. continue as strong allies, and the groundwork is being laid for good, strong trade agreements to flourish. And while at Windsor Castle, the president did not spill his tea on the rug while chatting with Queen Elizabeth, which his critics felt he was sure to do. But the one big question that we didn't have answered was why the Queen has always carried that large purse on her arm. What's in that thing? I mean, it's not like she's got to carry a driver's license or credit cards or coins for parking meters. My gosh, she's surrounded by people who will fetch any and everything she needs. I'm convinced that bag is full of Snickers bars. And every time she has to sit through some boring event or give that queenly wave of hers, just before she gets all grumpy, she digs out a Snickers and puts on her happy queen face. Now, when the president went to Helsinki for the meeting with Russian President Putin, we weren't privy to their extended private meeting, but we were witnesses to a less than stellar press conference, which was admittedly not the president's best public performance. The resounding criticism, even from his friends, resulted the next day in his admitting that he misspoke and does in fact trust our intel agencies. But a couple of observations. We don't know what was said behind closed doors, but let's be clear. Putin is a thug. The Russians did try to meddle in our elections. They murdered people on the streets of London, and they shouldn't be trusted for even directions to a Walmart. But there is no evidence, none, that they changed the outcome of the election or even one vote. And there's no evidence that candidate Trump colluded with the Russians, and so far President Trump has been far tougher on the Russians than any American president since President Reagan. He expelled their diplomats, he's busted their energy exports, which is the biggest blow to their economy. He carried out a promise to punish Syria for gassing their own people, and when he did it, he killed 200 Russian military personnel, and he has condemned them for their incursions into neighboring countries. There were no silly reset buttons like Hillary did. There was no nutty talk of having more flexibility once the election is over, like Obama said. And there were no cute nicknames like Pooty Poot that President George W. Bush gave Putin when he said that he looked into his eyes and saw his soul. President Trump was stung by the intelligence agencies who cooked up some phony dossiers that empowered other federal agencies to investigate him. Some of those agencies lied to Congress about it, then scrambled to allow any evidence to be destroyed that might have implicated his opponent or the previous president. The fact is, it was the previous president who knew there was Russian meddling and did nothing to stop it, nor even warn the nation it was happening, and whose intel agencies were the ones actively involved in covering up for the meddling. Look, our president isn't perfect, but I will gladly take the president we have, who may not always say the nicest things in the nicest ways, but who does the right things to protect America.